Alrighty, we are live. Let's see if we can get these other ones on. Alrighty, we are live on Instagram. Alrighty, look at that. First time looks like it's working out. We love to see it. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our chat about Black men and friendships. It has been a while since we have been on the streaming platforms. We've been real busy at the weight room. But if you guys have never heard of the weight room or you need a refresher who we are a virtual mental health practice exclusively designed for Black and Brown men and boys. And we are centered in 6 different states virtually. We are in California, Georgia, Texas, New York, New Jersey, and Virginia. And we're all about helping men and boys lift their emotional baggage into a healthier them. And so in the weight room, we don't even consider ourselves therapists. We're actually called spotters because when you're at the gym, right, and you're trying to lift that weight, you can't necessarily just do it by yourself. You need somebody to make sure, like, especially if you're new to it, they need to help you with form, they need to help you with that weight. Or sometimes you can have the weight, but it be too heavy. You need to help you lift it back up. So at the weight room, we're considered spotters, not therapists. But yeah, it's a little bit about us. Today, that's who's joining me is Madison. Madison is our spotter in Texas. He is a marriage and family therapist associate, which means he's getting his hours. He's almost done, which we're excited about that. And he like helps like a range of people, like relationship health, anxiety, depression. He even dabbles in some of the adolescents because the adolescents always need a little support. And so he is our phenomenal Texas resident. So Madison, welcome to the streaming of the weight room. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. Yeah. It's a good start to the week. I'm glad to have an opportunity to talk about the importance of um, black men and how the importance of building strong friendships.
Yes. And this is Madison's first time with us. So I'm pretty sure after this, he gonna want to do more, right? Because in this community, we love to have real conversations, especially when it comes to men and boys. So we gonna get right into it, right? Because this is a heavy topic, and obviously, if we in a perfect world, we would probably need like 5 parts. But we gonna take as much as we can today. So we're going to talk about friendships, especially for the male space, the man space, because there's been a lot of dialogue about Black men and friendships. Are they healthy? Are they superficial? The loneliness factor, right? Of if Black men have friends. We've seen articles of men developing and designing like support. I won't say support groups, but like groups that they can go like through some of those meetup apps and stuff where they can kind of come together and just hang out. And a lot of that has been motivated by the women in their lives saying, like, hey, you need friends. Like, it's cool that we're together and it's cool that you got work, but you need people to hang out with. So we've been seeing a lot of men doing that. There's been a lot of conversation about loneliness in men. So just a stat that I have found before we started this was 20% of men say they don't have any friends, close friends, which is, that's not okay, right? Like adult friendships are very important. Friendships in general are really important to the part of the design of the human structure. So we need friends. So the fact that men are saying that they don't have any friends and they are feeling more lonely, we need to talk about it. So I want to start off by talking about the 4 different types of friendships, right? Because it's very important to have this conversation about what type of friendships exist. So let's talk about the 4 different types. Now, you may not want to use this as your model, but that's okay. We're just going to go with the generic of the 4. So, the first one is acquaintances, right? This is a person that you might have met on social media. You might have met them through networking events. You may have seen them a few times, you know of them, but you really don't have that rapport where you guys are talking all the time, or you're hanging out one on one or like in a more intimate setting, there's really not a lot of in-depth conversation. It's just more of like you have a connection to each other. So that's one. The other one is casual conversation. So that's like a level up of acquaintance, right? Like now maybe we got each other's phone number. We, chatting back and forth a little bit, and we may hang out because we got similar interests, or a similar interest could be like we're both foodies, we both like concerts, and I really don't have people that have the same interest in me. So it'd be nice to go with people that have similar interests. So that's more of like a casual. You may talk, but not too often. Then we have close friend. The close friend is very significant because this is the person that you have built some type of a connection where you can peel some of the layers back in your experience with them. So they can be emotional support to you. Like if you're having a good day, you're having a bad day, you're able to share those moments with them, and it feels like it's in a safe space. You have a layer of trust with them that you don't lend out to everybody. You also can have fun with them, right? I think everybody feels like the close friend is just like the friend that you can just dump all your stuff on, but this is also like a fun friend too. But you also can hold each other down and accountable when stuff gets serious because you have that connection. They're your confidant, and essentially there's a layer of love that you have for them. That is a close friend. Then we have lifelong friend. We've been with it and through it throughout bunch of decades, bunch of different milestones. We may even include them like in our family. They may be God parents to our firstborn, secondborn, whatever. They've been around for a really, really, really long time. So they've gone through all the steps of friendship. So that is the four. A lot of times we often say we're friends with people that we really don't know, or they haven't invited us to really call them a friend. And so, Madison, what do you think about these four types? Do you see in your clinical work how some men may call like somebody a close friend, but they really don't have that connection that they're really a close friend, or maybe they call them an acquaintance and they're actually like in the close category? What are some of the things that you've seen in the male space?
So in the male space, what I see a lot of is there is sometimes that confusion of where does this person go in my life? Is this person, just somebody I hang out with to blow off some steam and decompress? Is this someone I can trust with important things? Is this someone who I can trust to hold me accountable when I'm possibly coming at a situation wrong, or when you just need general support otherwise? And I think it's important to for men to sit down and occasionally do that evaluation of really looking at their friends and asking themselves, okay, what classification do these different people go in? Who is actually my close friend? Who is the person I can actually depend on? And sometimes realizing that some of these people that we think are our friends are sometimes more closely closely they're more closely in the category of acquaintances.
Mhm.
We're not necessarily as close as we might want to believe we
Yeah. And so one of the things I kind of want to throw at you is we actually watched it in one of our supervisions at the weight room. Women were trying to understand how just because you guys went, to preschool together, or you like, playing PlayStation, that you guys consider that a close friend, right? Like what happened to everybody in your life, isn't on the same level as you. Some people you're going to outgrow, right? And it seems like for men, the time length that they know somebody, that staples them being a part of their life in the long run. Have you what first of all, as a man, what are your thoughts on that? And also, have you seen that in working with black men in this space?
Yeah, I think that something that I have seen happen is some of the men clients that I see, they'll say, I got friends. I don't and have this person been around 10, 20 years. They know all these things about me. I'm like, when was the last time you talked to this person? When was the last time you checked in on them emotionally speaking? and they'll be like, I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one. Something that all of us have to learn at some point in life is length of time you've known somebody does not necessarily equate to the strength of the friendship. Because you can have people in your lives that you've known 10, 20 years. And as Dr. Patrice pointed out, sometimes you outgrow these people. Sometimes, yes, this is somebody you've known since preschool, but their mentality may not have grown much since that time. And at that point, you have to make that decision and evaluate for yourself. Do I really want this person to be considered a close friend, or do I need to keep them at a distance? Do I need to keep them on at all? Um, but yeah, I definitely think with the men I see in sessions, um, that sometimes there is that confusion, um, or even just an aversion to even going into that realm of things of talking about friends, because as we talked about at the start of this, um, getting older and making friends from scratch is a lot more difficult than we care to talk about or admit.
Listen,
Um,
it's rough out there, right? Because like in the sandbox, it was like, oh, you throw sand too? Let me like we're friends. Like it was something. It was so
no,
different.
it definitely was different because, and that's usually how I start that conversation off with men. That back when we were in school for at least a third of the day, if not more, you're around people in your age group for at least half the day. So it's natural that you're going to eventually come across people who think the same way you do and like the same thing. So it's a lot easier that you just kind of automatically make friends. But when you're older and you're working and you're dealing with family and dealing with whatever issue, other things may come up in your world, it's not an there's not a natural organic place where you're just in proximity with men in your age range who are interested in the same things. You have to actually intently go out there and find that, and that can be challenging, especially if you're not necessarily the outgoing type like that. It might be more difficult.
Well, also too, like if we really think about like grade school friendships, it was because we were under the same roof, right? And so even when you kind of look back at like those type of friendships, were you hanging out with those kids on the weekends? Like, were you guys going to like if you guys had birthday parties, were you guys going to each other's functions? Like some of these things that we were taught as kids that because like we have to have friends, we have to have people to play with, that kind of equated to friendships. But as
Mhm.
we evolved, I would say like probably like high school, maybe college era, we realized like being under the same like space doesn't mean that we're friends, like we're acquaintances and we can hold each other down in those spaces, but we don't have a lot of depth. And so that's something that in childhood, I mean, we don't understand and we're not really taught that. So if you built something in childhood, you're going to take it with you in adulthood, right? But it is a different space when it seems like for men, loyalty is a very critical part of life, right? And so there are times where men do feel guilty, especially if they're evolving as a human being, right? Like maybe they got an education, maybe they're climbing the ladder at work, or maybe just their person in itself has significantly changed. They often feel guilty about separating themselves from people that knew them from the ground up. And so that loyalty factor often confuses or dilutes what type of friendships are important, right? Or
Right.
needed, right? Like over time, our needs change. And so it seems like there's just a lot of guilt with like, we ain't really vibing like that right now, but I also don't want to be that dude because I'm over here that they think I'm better than them. And that's why like I don't want to rock with them. Do you feel like that is something that men often battle within themselves about who to select in their life or keep in their life?
Absolutely, because the thing is, when as you grow, you start to learn more about the world that you're in, learn about some of the ways that we may have previously spoken or behaved, and realize, okay, back then I didn't know too much about this, but now I know saying certain things, being certain ways, and doing certain things are problematic, and so I need to actually pivot. I need to adjust how I'm going to be. And if you're making these changes and trying to, grow and evolve as a person, and this person that you've been rocking with, like we've said since preschool, if you're this person you've been rocking with says, nope, I don't want to change what I'm doing. I've been doing this way all this time. Why do I have to change what I'm doing now just because somebody said it was problematic? Um, and there is a certain level of guilt that will sit with a person of like, man, if I'm the one to end this friendship, what is that saying? Is it saying, am I saying that I'm better than this person because I'm choosing to end this thing or put some more distance between me and this person? And it's sometimes it's difficult to get to that space of being okay with, realizing that you and this person have grown apart, or that you're in two separate levels of life, and that for what you have going on, you and this person may no longer be a fit. And it doesn't have to be this whole, insulting thing of I'm better than you. It's just you making that realization and, having that conversation with that person and just having that adult conversation about it.
Yeah, our journeys are changing, right? Or sometimes there's a demotion, right? And the four types of friendships that we talked about, they can move levels at any given time. They can demote, they can get promoted. And so sometimes those close friends that you had that aren't evolving have to go down to acquaintances. Sometimes those acquaintances go to close friendships. So hopefully that gives like a good understanding of like just some of the dynamics of what types of friendships, but also like how you can get caught up in staying in one lane, or having a group of people in a lane that really isn't serving you. And also just being okay with like nobody said how long each journey in life is going to last. Sometimes the journey, it's the finish line. And the finish line is not always like I've had that experience forever. It was impactful for when I had it, when I had it. So let's talk about communication styles. All right. So there's a few communication styles. This is very important, when we talk about friendships. But I do want to ask you, Madison, like, what are some like stereotypes and like cultural expectations that have impacted the design of like Black men and friendships? Like, what are some things that kind of not prevents them, but gives them second thought about moving in the types of like the friendship styles we're talking about, and also what we're going to lead into communication styles? What are your thoughts on those things?
So I feel like when we're talking about societal expectations and other cultural things that could stand in the way of us as men having these more solid friendships. One of those things is, and I hate using this term because it's kind of been overused in our culture, but certain ideas from past generations of toxic masculinity, a lot of those artifacts from those generations of men, um, I think definitely impede the progress we could be having, because for a lot of them, like our people who are our parents, our grandparents, our uncles, they may not have been given that space to be vulnerable, that space to not have to be strong, that space to have boundaries and express their feelings. Um, in their time of living, they may not have ever had that space. So then for them, they may pass down that idea of, well, I didn't have that space and I had to figure things out. So you got to do the same thing. And the truth is, no, you don't. You do not have to do the same thing that previous generations have done if there's a better, healthier path to stronger friendships that are meaningful for us.
Yeah, and so some of the expectations I'm hearing you talk about is more of like that toughness, right? Of like men friendships are not about us like talking about vulnerable stuff or like life is hard. It's more about like we're gonna hang out so that we can shoot the breeze, so that we can take a load off from like we're really not supposed to be talking about how we can't handle things. You're just holding space for me to like just blow some steam off, right?
Right.
And maybe at a point, maybe that did work for the men experience. But as we're becoming more in tune with our mental health and just some of the generational stuff, trauma, post traumatic slave syndrome and things like that, we're realizing like we were never really designed to hold everything to ourselves. We're supposed to be sharing these experiences with other people, but how Black people, were designed to thrive and live, we didn't have those luxuries, right? And so, like you said, what our parents did or what previous generations did, that's what they passed down. And us introducing like, nah, I actually need like a little bit more sensitivity in my friendships. If I didn't need it, you didn't need it. Like, you probably did need it, you just didn't get it. And so I'm gonna try to change the course of what my friendships look like. So I think that's really important to note that sometimes our the people that taught us friendships are the ones that went through a lot in life, and they didn't get that space either. And so that is a cultural expectation for men to just figure it out for themselves, and their friends are just supposed to be the fun ones. But let's talk about these communication styles. So, Madison, what are the type of communication styles that you often educate your clients on?
So with my clients, be they, and this goes across the board with individuals, couples, whoever I see, the communication styles we always talk about are passive, aggressive,
Mhm.
passive aggressive,
Passive
that
aggressive is that one.
and of course assertive. Um, with
That one that
passive,
always gets labeled as anger for Black people, right? Is assertiveness, right? That's a
right,
whole nother conversation, but continue.
mhm, absolutely. But with passive communication, that's where we're talking about a situation where typically that person is going to put everybody else's needs, wants, and desires before their own desires. So if somebody says something, even if they want to say no, they may not even say anything. They may not even contribute just to make sure they don't rock the boat or do anything to upset anybody in the equation. So um, yeah, that's what past communication styles looks like. That's you not responding at all. That's if somebody says something or does something you don't like, you just let it slide every time. Like you just let it slide because you don't want to upset anybody else. You don't want to potentially get into an argument, and that's how that goes.
And that's kind of
Um,
a dangerous one, right? Because if you let that stuff build up, tick tick boom, that boom hits and everybody's like, what happened? What's going on? Are you all right? And you're like, I haven't been all right for a while. But if you don't talk about it, because you don't, and a lot of people are passive too because they don't want that confrontation, right? At some point your lid is going to blow off because you can only hold so much. So that passive one could be very very dangerous if you don't check it. So if you
right.
relate to the passive, it ain't healthy.
Not at all. Not even close.
Not even
Because
close.
some people do equate that they're like, oh, I never get into any arguments with anybody, and I'm like, being
Mm,
conflict avoidant doesn't necessarily mean you're engaging in a healthy way. It just means you're avoiding the difficult conversations that have to be had by all of us.
right. You're
Um,
right.
so the one that we talk about, if we're going to talk about passive, the next one we usually talk about is aggressive. So that's your people who are where the passive person is putting everybody else's needs, wants, and desires in the equation before their own. The aggressive person, only thing that matters is their wants, their needs, their desires. So this is the person who kicks the door in and they just start talking about whatever they want to talk about. If somebody else tries to change the topic or tries to participate in the conversation, they're going to interrupt the person. They're going to try to steer the conversation at all times. The tools those kind of people usually use are, they're very critical of everybody in the equation. They're sometimes very, very loud. They're using very disrespectful language. They just are coming at it in the most, as the name states, aggressive ways. Like they're just really coming at you, coming in hot, and
Aren't
that's
those the
basically how
ones
that.
too that often lead with sarcasm? Like, because they're mad about something, they're really not talking about it, but like you can pick up like they really ain't they really ain't all right. Like they got a
Well,
little bit of a shyness to them.
I would say to me that more so feels to me like the third one. That feels like the passive aggressive people,
All
the
right
people
now.
who are like they're mad about something, but they're not going to directly say, "Hey." I'm upset with you about this. They're just going to talk around it. They're going to throw all kinds of um, sarcasm into the conversation. They're going to come with the sneak dissing, as
They're
some
more
people would
indirect,
call it.
right?
They're
That
very indirect.
that shade, like I caught that. Mm.
They'll like, I guess, and when we talk about like in social media, those are the people who like they'll tweet or post something and they won't at you, they won't actually at the person that they're talking about, but they'll just say, well, some people really need to learn how to blah 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 blah, and it's like, so who are you talking about? So yeah, that to me that speaks more to that passive aggressive. Like, you're not being passive, you're not saying nothing about it, but you're also not being very direct. So you're like right in the middle there. You're not going for the gusto. Okay. Yeah, I think my screen blanked out for a second. I don't know where it clicked off. Did,
No, keep going.
can you hear me?
We were with you the whole time.
Okay, yeah, sorry. My screen went blank, so that's, I don't know what
That's okay.
happened there.
No,
But
you're
anyway,
I think your connection was just
um,
being a little funky, but we could still hear you, so you still good.
okay, cool. So, but yeah, passive aggressive. Those are the people who they have issues, they have things they want to talk about, but they're not willing to be clear and direct about it. So they're going to go the indirect routes and be very hostile, but not very clear about what it is, who it is they're talking about, or what they want to accomplish.
So the ones we've covered so far is passive aggressive. What else do we cover?
We've covered passive, we've covered aggressive, and then we've covered passive aggressive. So
All right.
there's passive, there's aggressive, and then right dead in the middle is
Is
passive
the
aggressive.
bow passive aggressive?
Both of
Hmm. That's a dangerous
them.
one too, because
Mhm.
what honestly, like when I see passive aggressive people, they're like what we call like the sweethearts, like, oh, they're so nice, but like that passive with that aggression, like they be throwing darts. Like you like, ouch. Like, did I catch a stray? It's not a stray. That was a bullet
Right.
going.
Right. And sometimes with the passive aggressive folks, those are the people who they're not going to directly tell the person that they have the issue with, but boy, you give them an audience of anybody else, they'll be like, well, let me tell you about this sorry blank blank over here. And they'll say everything at that point, but of course now they're being clear and direct about what it is they feel. But when it comes to that person being in the room right in front of them or on the phone with them, it's like, oh no, everything's good, everything's fine. Mm,
Is it though? No, it's not.
it's not.
So hopefully us breaking that down, everybody has a style, and you can't say we're still got one more, but you can't say that you don't have any of these. We all fall in categories of at least one, depending on the
Mm,
temperature, the day, and the person. We can even variety where we're going to be with that person. So the last one is one that we often talk about in the Black community, especially on the woman side, because this is the one that is often labeled as angry, right? Especially for Black people, which is assertive. So tell me, Madison, about the assertive. That's where we want. That's where we hope to get in our communication, right? Is the
mhm.
assertiveness.
Absolutely. So assertive is exactly where we want to be. We want to be um, when you are expressing yourself in full, you're being direct, you're being open, you're being honest, you're willing to hold yourself accountable for whatever part you may be playing in this relationship, in this conversation. You're also willing to hold yourself accountable, hold them accountable. Whatever's going on there, there is no question about what it is you want to happen, what you're feeling, what you're thinking. Nobody's having to guess, nobody's having to figure it out randomly or assume. They know exactly where you're coming from, they know exactly what you're wanting to accomplish. And it basically, in short, as with the other ones, you may be confused as to what the person was trying to convey. An assertive person, an assertive style of communication leaves no questions. You know exactly what's going on.
You know exactly what's going on, and this isn't a way where it's welcoming, right? I think a lot of times when we talk about people being direct in what they want, we often leave that of like they are in a like a disrespectful tone, or very very monotone or doesn't have any emotion behind it, but that's not necessarily the case. So a great example, because we talk about this often in anger management of assertiveness, is like, say like, a friend maybe, toted the line on a boundary of like bringing up something in the past that was really harmful. Sometimes people like to bring up, well, remember, you said this happened in your childhood, or you remember when so and so said this about you, and that might have been something that you shared, but you don't need them to bring it back up, right? And so that might be a boundary violation. You can tell them like, hey, I know that you were trying to be helpful, but bringing up like the past, especially that particular person or that particular time, made me feel like you were throwing it in my face. And so I'm hoping moving forward when I have conversations with you, that those type of previous experiences don't get brought back up, because that doesn't help me. If anything, that puts me back on guard. Like the way that I just described that, it wasn't like, you piece of whatever, how dare you try
Mhm.
me like that? Like, you don't talk to me like that. Like, that is more of like, now there is some like aggression of like, hold up, I didn't know. Now I gotta be defensive. It's more of like, I just want to bring to your attention like this bothered me and what I need moving forward. That is the best and most healthy part of conflict resolution it can have, is telling somebody what they did wrong and how could they do better in the future. That is the area of how we grow as people, and also how we grow in our connections, because our needs change. Our conversation styles change, and so maybe what once worked, we are growing into a space where it doesn't work anymore, and so people can't keep up unless you tell them.
Mhm. I definitely, there's something very important about making sure there is a kind of at least some sort of warning period when it comes to informing somebody that they crossed the boundary, or to letting them know that something that they said or did hit you the wrong way, or that it was problematic, or that it was an issue for you. Because I think what happens sometimes, especially in our communities, is this idea that, oh, if I know that this is disrespectful for me, everybody should, across the board, should just
Mhm.
automatically know that was inappropriate, that was wrong,
Mhm.
problematic. And so, going off that same assumption, some people are like, well, there's no need for me to have a conversation about this. They should already know that this is an issue. So if they do it again, I'm just going to cut them off. The problem there being, if you never had the conversation to say, hey, I have a problem when you behave this way. I have a problem when you speak to me in this way. If you've never given a warning, if you've never said it was an issue before, you can have every right to cut them off, but they're also going to have every right to look at you and be like, this person has never told me this was an issue for them before. We've been doing this, we've been behaving this way or speaking in this way for years. So I don't understand what's going on. So you have a right to end the connection how you see fit, but this person also has the right to be absolutely confused about what's going on.
Yeah, we definitely want to give people an opportunity to correct behavior. And also, sometimes it's not going to happen overnight, right? Like, it depends on that connection you have with that person. You know how many tries you want to give them. You know if you don't want to give them any tries. But like Madison said, and I absolutely agree, like that is also like a layer of anxiety of like, oh, like, I feel a way about them and I don't want to address it because of I don't want to have conflict. I don't want to do the back and forth. So it's just better for me to just like fade in the back. That's not fair to relationships. And a lot of times, especially when we talk about anxiety and things like that, social anxiety, that is like a big indicator of like really how you feel about intertwining and connecting with people, is how you deal with your conflict. And so some people, they grew up in different backgrounds, they have different experiences. You got to remember that your friends also have other friends, and so their dynamic may be different. And so everybody's just trying to figure it out and be themselves. And sometimes we do need a little check, or sometimes we do need to realize that we got to switch stuff up. Like, we got to give
Right.
people an opportunity. I think sometimes we're that opportunity was, I let you in my space and you violated, so that's it. It's like, oh, is there a rating scale for the violations that maybe we can incorporate to better help our relationships, is very important. So I got a question for Madison.
Yeah.
We talk about this particular topic often, in our supervision, is how do Black men navigate the balance between using humor as a coping mechanism within their friendships particularly faced with challenging experiences or traumatic experiences. And we always talk about this because as a people, right, we talk about how, especially in the slavery era, how laughter really got us through some challenging times. And so if we kind of notice when like stuff is really getting serious or stuff is hitting the fan, the jokes just fly and they freestyle and they just keep coming, right?
Yeah.
And our stomachs
Yeah.
hurt, we're laughing and everything, but sometimes we don't know how to turn that off, or sometimes
Mhm.
this was not the time to be doing that. And so sometimes we call that playing the dozens with our friends, and in other terms. But
Right.
this is a really big thing in the man space, because every time like I turn on like reality TV, everybody knows like I'm a pop culture person. Every time I'm watching something, like when the men start talking, there's always some type of joke flowing, flying, and I can tell like sometimes the guys are like, I don't even want to talk about this anymore because y'all are just making this a joke. And then some guys are like, don't serious me out, like have fun with it. Like I'm telling you something, but it don't got to be serious. And so can you explain to people, because they probably don't even know what I'm talking about, playing the dozens? What is playing the dozens?
So playing the dozens, for those who are not informed, like if you're a part of the Black community, it's usually something that you will eventually learn at one point or another.
Yes, you
But
will.
for those, but for sometimes you'll learn about it firsthand. But I
Yup.
digress.
You
Point
ain't even
being,
ready.
um, for those outside of the Black community, playing the dozens is basically when you're going back and forth with insults or with jokes about something about that person, about their life, about their family, about whatever. A lot of times, whatever the topic is at hand, that's usually going to be where the jokes come from and where the insults fly or whatever. And um, you know, as Dr. Patrice talked about, it's one of those things that um, for us, it's a lot easier to interact with things on a less serious level when we can,
Yup.
make a little quick joke about it. And of course, when we talk about social media, a lot of times those jokes come at light speed. Like before people even have a moment to process exactly what they're looking at, there's like 50 different memes or GIFs or whatever about the event. And the problem that that can cause when we take it down to a more micro level of just male friendships is sometimes a guy will come to his friends about something serious that happened, like let's say they're going through a difficult breakup, or they just had a very serious death in the family, or something difficult that they're coming across in their life, and they try to bring it to their friends. If there's no space to actually talk about things on a serious level without immediately trying to flip it to a joke, then that person is going to come into the group or come to that person thinking, okay, I'm trying to tell you about something important, something challenging in my life, and you're making jokes about it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I won't come to you about that anymore. I guess I'll stop telling you about anything important or serious in my life. I'll just keep it very surface level, very, let's talk about sports, let's talk about gaming, let's talk about stuff that is cool and it's good to do, but when it comes to important life difficult things, I'm not going to talk to you about it. I'm not.
Emotional connection. I'm not going to emotionally connect because I don't have trust and safety in me really telling you about like real life stuff.
Absolutely.
And like it's interesting too, because a lot of people that do lead with jokes is because they often don't know what to say.
Hmm.
I think that in times where stuff is serious, and life is always serious, right? A lot of people do lead with jokes is because they don't know the right things to say. And I think a lot of times we talk about Black mental health, and we actually talk about language, right? Of like being strong and all that, and how you keep telling me I'm strong, you're really not seeing that I'm struggling.
Hmm.
That people often feel like they have canned responses of like, oh, that sucks, dog. Like, you know, I can only imagine how much like, that impacts you. Like, wish I could, help you or figure out something different, or like, you gonna be all right. Or if you want to take it to like spiritual religion around, like God can't put more on you than you can bear. Nobody want to hear that in that moment. I'll say that till I'm blue in the face. Nobody want to hear that in their crisis moment. Okay, tell them the next day or the next week. Okay,
Nah.
work.
Mm-mm.
Work. So, are there any tips that you can think of, like just even in your own experience of like your own friendships of like
Mhm.
those that feel like whatever they say is not going to be valuable, or they're afraid to say the wrong things, so they try to lighten up the mood? What are some things that you can give them in like stepping into that uncomfortable realm of like sometimes you just don't got to say anything? It's more about like holding space for them and maybe what that can look like if you feel like you're not a wordsmith.
Right. And so, words are not necessarily the thing that we're all good at. That's the thing. If you are not used to having those in-depth emotional conversations, sometimes you don't know what to say, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing
I
wrong with it.
think that tip wise, if I were to say anything, it would be one. Sometimes it's just starting the conversation with that before you even really get going with what's going on. It's letting whoever it is, whether it's one friend or your group of friends, just go ahead and let them know off rip, like, hey, I kind of have something important to talk to you guys about, and I'm asking you if you could hold. I know we normally joke about everything that we talk about, but I need you to just hold back on the jokes this one moment and just listen. Because then you're giving them the instruction of what they need to do. They're not having to sit there and scratch their head and figure out what do I do in this situation. You literally just told them, I just need you to listen. That's it. Um, to kind of piggyback off that first tip, sometimes it's something that I often tell individuals as well as couples that I see, even that sometimes communication wise, when you are trying to have a conversation about something difficult, sometimes it's good to, if you're the person on the receiving end and you're supposed to just be listening or you're trying to figure out what to say or how to show up, it may be you asking this person if they're saying they have something important to talk to you about or something serious. Ask them what their needs are in that moment. Just simply ask, do you need me to listen to you and just listen to you, or do you want any kind of advice or anything like that? Because sometimes somebody's coming to you with something and they don't actually want you to advise them in any way, shape, or form. They just want you to listen. And you can save yourself a lot of grief of trying to figure out the perfect thing to say.
Mhm.
They just want you to listen. Or if they actually do want advice, they can tell you, hey, I'm not sure which direction I'm going with this. So after I tell you this, let me know what your thoughts are. Sometimes they just want to know what you genuinely think. That's not something you have to scratch your head and make up. It's they're asking you your opinion. So some on both people's ends, the sender as well as the receiver, you have this opportunity to just simply ask what the person needs, or if you're the person giving the information, stating what your needs are. Those are two things that I would definitely recommend to all men who come into situations they're like, I don't know how to deal with this emotional stuff. I don't know what to do with this in-depth, serious conversation. Like, how do I approach it? Sometimes that direct approach of just like, what do you need in this situation? That even you just asking that will do wonders in your friendships.
Yeah, so basically I would coin that as like support. What type of support style do you need? Do you need feedback? Do you need to just be heard? Do you need solutions, right? We talk about how men are very solution oriented. So if you're telling them something, that must mean you want them to figure it out. Sometimes, your friends aren't putting that labor on you. They just need a space to just talk about it. They just need a space to be not considered, but just validated. Like, that does suck. Like, I would feel the same way if I was in the same situation. Like, sometimes that goes a lot farther than you trying to be Dr. Phil to your friends. Like, they don't always want that, okay? And
Right.
I'll be honest, like there will be some times where they, a lot of their things that that's what they want, and they may switch up. And so, like Madison said, and I wholeheartedly agree, when they say like, "Yo, I need to talk to you about something," the first thing I ask my friends, and maybe because I'm a therapist and I've learned like, let me figure out if I got the space for this too. What are you looking for me in this moment? Am I listening and that's it? Am I validating you? Are you asking for it like, advice or whatever? Like, let me prep myself so I know where I'm showing up for you. And if they're like, I don't know, I just need to get off my chest, and you about to just listen. Like, if they don't know, they'll ask you when they figure it out, right? And just know, like, Emotional stuff it can be confusing and it can be scary and it can be a lot. And so you don't always have to know what to do with it. You just need to be present sometimes, and that's okay. And
Yeah.
the more that you open the space for your friends, the more it'll open for you too. Sometimes the start of understanding how good it can feel is lending it first to see how it feels. And so if you build that connection with your friends, you're going to get it back when you need it as well. So we have a few minutes. So I want to go into really quick converting friendships into community, because we started off this conversation about men not really having friends, or maybe they're not categorizing these people that they know as friends, or just like the loneliness factor, right? So
Hmm.
some of the things that we talk about in signs of like a good friend would be like, do you feel like authentically comfortable around this person? Like, is it vibes on vibes on vibes when you're with this person? Like, can you laugh? Can you cry? Can you just feel like good? Like, that is the sign of like a person that can really be a good friend. Um, do they bring the best out of you? Can you trust them with information? Sometimes we throw like little seeds out to see what they're gonna do with it, and they do well with it, so we throw more at them. Is that somebody that you can really trust as like your safe bank, right? I call it like a bank, like they just hold it. Can you safely disagree? Like, one thing about real friends, you ain't always gonna be on the same page about stuff, and you're
Hmm.
not gonna always agree. Can we, respectfully disagree, and it not like, I'm not gonna talk to you for a few days, or how dare you, you not agree with me? Can we safely and healthily conflict with each other? Friendship is about conflict. Relationships in general are about conflict. So can you guys come to the table and really talk about how you feel without it always dangling on the side of like, are we gonna be cool or not? If you have
Hmm.
this type of dynamic with somebody, that's a solid friend. On the other side of that, if you have somebody that they only want you for what they want you for, but they give nothing back. If they seem like every time you tell them something positive you want to share, they always want to one up you and tell you about themselves. Or when you say something, they're automatically talking about themselves or moving forward with talking to themselves. If you
Hmm.
if you ask them not to do something about you and they continue to crip walk, two step, twerk on it, whatever, they just don't care. That's not a good friend. Like, obviously, that boundary is something they think like it's a fun thing to have. That doesn't happen at me because this is literally how I am all the time in explaining stuff. Like, really, like
I,
people are like, oh, boundary, that's cool.
no,
They don't
I
care.
mean, I'm laughing at her because that is how she. This is how she always is. But I think I'm also laughing. I'm thinking about like on that, unfortunately, on that negative side, and I imagine I'm not the only man who's ever experienced this or felt this way. But yeah, as Dr. Patrice was talking about, when you're evaluating your friendships and evaluating, is this person a friend or not a friend, or do I even want them to be a friend? It is paying attention to things like that. And one of those things that we as men encounter sometimes are those people who, like, you say you do this thing and it becomes a pissing contest. It becomes a
Yes.
Mr. Me Too thing, like, oh, you
Yeah.
did this. Well, I did this da, 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 years ago. I don't know what you talking about. Or you did this, I did it
Yeah.
twice. And it's like, but nobody asks you
Nobody
for
asked you
that.
about your
Why why
your
why is
experience with
your
it.
why is your experience, why is your immediate reaction to me bringing something to y'all that I'm excited about to one up me and say you've already done this thing twice, or that's no big deal, or you're trying to diminish it? Like, if that is what that person, if you have a person in your life who that is their consistent role, that is not your
That's some jealousy right there.
friend. That
Right
is not
there.
your friend.
That's some jealousy because what? Like, there's space for us to celebrate each other, but
Hmm.
if it's always on the heels of like what I did, you're not celebrating me. You're feeling a way about me, and so you're not a friend. In fact, that can't even, to me, that can't even be an acquaintance. Like, we don't, like, you be over there, I be over here. And so those are the things that we often have passiveness with, right?
Hmm.
And those are people that we just really can't call friends. Friends should really hold, that title alone should really hold some weight. It shouldn't be for everybody. So if you have
Yeah.
situations like that where you're hesitant to tell them because you don't know how they're going to respond, Or, they're often like, well, this isn't a really great time for me to talk about something positive because I'm going through a lot. And it seems like it's never a great time to, have those ebbs and flows. You might be like their therapist, to be honest. And if you didn't sign up for that, which probably not, that's also considering how much of yourself you can lend to that person and how much of them that you can have in your space. Um, so the last thing that I wanted to wrap up with is, I'm not going to toot the horn too loud because women friendships are very complicated as well. Everybody always talks about how we never make it back from Miami in one piece. Like, we all go on a group chat, girl guys, whatever. We come back, we ain't friends no more, or Vegas.
Ooh. Oh boy.
And I'm gonna say, as like a woman, obviously I've definitely been in those dynamics before. But one of the things that experts and people that work in this space of like building communication, effective relationships, and we talk about the difference between men and women, is that women build community better. Like, it's not like we're bragging about it. It's just something that we naturally have. And so one of those things is because when we want something, we're going to go for it. Like, if I want a friend, I'm about to go somewhere and see where the vibes are at. But also women have better, we're more open to being disappointed. I'll say that. Anytime you get into a relationship, whether it's romantic, platonic, or whatever, there's always a risk of getting hurt. There's always a risk of things not going the way that you want to. But we're okay with taking that risk because we also look at the reward and benefit of it. So that's why women do go on these trips together, or it seems like we got a new best friend or we got new friends, because we're willing to put ourselves out there. When it comes to men, especially in the black man space, a lot of times ego is what stops them from really putting their foot out there and trying. If one person like doesn't give you the response you want, you cut everybody off from ever getting a try. It's like, no, like that person wasn't a fit, but you could be irritated about it and try again. And so I say, and maybe take more of the risk of like getting hurt.
I would stand to agree. Like I think that, you know, as little as it's talked about, because there's this fear of being labeled a certain way if you are openly expressing feelings, or you experience disappointments and express that. um I think men have to be more willing to take that risk to put themselves out there and be like, hey, I actually enjoy spending time with you. I would like to be your friend, and actually being able to say that. Because for most men who ever see this, you're probably thinking, I've never gone up to another man and said, hey, you want to be my friend? Like, no, like that's not how we typically do things. But again, I would pose to that same man, what's so wrong with doing that? What's so wrong? Not maybe not necessarily, you don't have to do it in that exact fashion, but there's nothing wrong with actually asking, hey, I'm enjoying hanging out with you, and I feel like you're somebody I trust. Do you feel that same way? So that you're not sitting there with this whole, I'm not sure how this person feels. I feel this way, but I don't know how they feel, and I'm not going to ask because that's weird.
And also
I
being
want
okay with like if it doesn't work. Like, if the
right.
person is not, or you tried a friendship and maybe, they didn't do well with like your sensitive information, or like I said, they two-stepped on your boundary. You can't have cognitive distance. If that one person did it, that means everybody else moving forward is going to do it.
Mhm.
You have to
Right.
take the risk of like, there is going to be disappointment in anything that we build. So not only put yourself out there, but also be prepared to put yourself out there more than once. Like, take the risk. It's really worth it.
Right. Because again, as Dr. Patrice said, throughout this, we are not meant to live this life alone. Like, we deal with so much stuff, not just as men, not just as black men, but as people. We deal with so many different heavy things, and we can't continue going through life with this mentality and that stereotypical mentality of, I'm a man, I'm supposed to be able to handle every single thing that is thrown at me by myself.
Yeah.
That is dangerous thinking. That is problematic thinking. You will hurt yourself every single time if that is the way you choose to think. You have to be able to evolve enough and grow enough to say, hey, I don't have to do this by myself, and I don't want to do this by myself. I want to
I want
share the
help.
load.
I want to
I
share
want
the
help.
food. I want support. Yeah. And also, to piggyback off of what Madison said really quick, I just want to remind everybody that Black men are in a crisis when it comes to their mental health. They are leading the numbers in suicide deaths, not attempts, but deaths. And I know the numbers are always going to say, white males are going to be, well, there's a lot more white males that are actually, looked out for, study part of the numbers. And, a lot of us are in different spaces where we don't always make up the numbers. But there has been a time, and it's going up, where like 7 to 8 Black men die a day by suicide. And
Mhm.
that is the leading cause of that is depression, whether they talk about it or not. And so, Black men, you guys knowing that now, if you didn't know, knowing that just shows like this world for you is not meant to be lived alone. And so some of these friends that have been around for a while, they can help you with the load. Your load is not so heavy that nobody can't help you, and they can manage their load and also lend support to your load as well. So many times I hear, well, my dog, he got a lot on his plate. He got kids, he got a wife, yeah, but he can hold space for you too. Like, we all literally got our own ish going on, but when it comes to people that we love, we will find a corner to give to them. Allow your friends to be your community. It's nobody else's responsibility but yours to invite people to be that to you. They don't know unless you open the door.
Right. And I guess my last little nugget before we bring things to a close, if I would say anything um, that can be helpful in all your relationships, it's, you know, we talked about the difficulty of talking about those heavier topics and those heavier things that are going on in our world, and dealing with that feeling of, I don't want to be a burden to anybody else. Um, Something you can always do with the loved ones in your life is just, again, that simple communication, that simple ask of, hey, do you have the mental space to hear anything or handle anything today? um, it may sound like a strange question or a weird question to ask, but you'll be surprised by the reaction you'll get of how many people aren't asked that, and how many people are accustomed to people just kind of metaphorically and actually speaking, busting the door and immediately starting to just trauma dump and dump all their problems and issues. And then once they're done dumping everything, they leave. They're good to go. But to have somebody that actually walks into their world and say, hey, do you even have a space for this today? If you don't, I understand. We can talk about this another time or something. But just giving that a little bit of extra consideration will go a long way in, as we talked about, building those friendships with people. People will see that, people will hear that, and they'll be like, wow, this person actually cares about what's going on with me before they just come in dumping their stuff. They're actually checking in with me, and that is important, and I treasure that.
Awesome. Thank you for that last tip, Madison. So if you guys are following us on YouTube, make sure you guys subscribe to our channel, as we are going to be pushing out more of these conversations. If you guys are looking for a Black male therapist, the entire practice outside of myself are Black men, and they have the experience to help you, whether you're a first time person to go into therapy or you're looking to come back. Our website is in the ticket taper below, thebbweightroom.com. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter as well at BB Weight Room. And until next time, everybody, you guys have a great evening. Bye.
Bye.